Welcome, Benja. A pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
I want to preface that Benja is my partner, and we're actually recording this interview from different rooms of our home. So we're about 50 feet away from each other, but on screen so that the video is a good setup. So welcome. So nice
Thank you.
to have you here as you're one of the most impressive community builders I know, particularly for IRL community, and you've been doing it for so long. So, would you like to introduce yourself and in the context of IRL community building and the community that you want to talk about today?
Sure. Um, I have been designing immersive experiences for about 15 years now. And that started mostly in the DIY experience design world in the Bay Area, where I got involved in a lot of different wacky, weird, and wild art parties. And that led me to creating some of my own original work and doing performance art, and eventually helping start an immersive events production company called Take Three with some friends, where we throw multi-day interactive narrative parties. And that organization also sort of like doubles as an art collective where we've supported emerging immersive artists to create original works through an art grant program and community support services, and has become sort of like a launching pad for a lot of different artists. And that's been happening for the past decade. And we do that at a few different events in the Bay Area over the course of the year.
And what's your role and contribution with them nowadays?
So I was the founding creative director and developed, designed the entire art grant system, as well as the sort of like narrative arc approach to immersive festivals, and built the scaffolding for that, and have since stepped aside and allowed new and emerging talent to take the steering wheel. And I've transitioned into a director on the board of directors as well as a creative advisor for the organization.
Hmm. And if you were to explain what Take Three does in like 10 words, how would you explain it to people?
Take Three creates imaginary worlds where artists produce peak experiences for transformation.
Oh, okay, okay. I never heard you explain it that way. I'm
I've never
intrigued.
explained it that way.
You're like a new and updated version.
It's a different
Okay.
elevator every time for the elevator pitch.
Yeah, totally. You're like different stranger, different elevator.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, amazing. So because I know Benja intimately as my partner, and I know Take Three intimately as one of the many communities that I have been in over the years, um, I have so many questions for you that I know that we've got the basic questions that are really interesting because the way that Take Three has structured themselves, that as you said, you're an art collective and also you're now a nonprofit. And there is a combination of gathering people while also making money and finding the balance between those. So I really, there's a lot of community builders who are trying to work out ways to do both of those things. So I really would love to hear more about that as we talk. But before we get into more of the meatier things, I want to ask you some basic questions about like how is Take Three run? What are like the practical details of it so that other community builders who are maybe like at the very start of their journey or a year in and finding that first like hump or a few years in and considering a pivot to a different structure or a different approach. So let's come back to basics. And I want to ask you a few questions. What are the values of Take Three as a community?
We actually have them listed out, and I don't have them memorized, but
Shocking.
but I think some of them are participation, respect for one another, and the venue and the environment that we host the events in. Weirdness, we're an event and collective series born from radical self-expression, and weirdness is how we've sort of like distilled that into one word, celebrating people flying their freak flag. I think creativity is a really core value. We are a platform for people to develop their creative skills, and community is, what we're here to talk about. That's a core element as well. We have designed our events and our container to exist past the walls of the event. It is a year-round project that takes shepherding and nurturing across all 365 days of the year. And so when we talk about community, we do so in the truest sense of the word through mutuality and through collective action and through shared resources and through uh, really looking at how to hold everybody to the highest standards of how they show up in community.
Hmm. You literally read my mind. I was about to ask you, what does community mean to you or in the context of Take Three? And you went there. So it was
Try
perfect.
me.
You're like one step ahead, baby. Okay. Amazing. Beautiful answer. Feel as though I should probably know the values of it as well. I know there's probably like 6 to 8 values, but I think so often communities have values that they embody, but they don't necessarily have like the vision or the mission statement memorized in their head, which is a bigger conversation that I think is interesting. But I think that Take Three really knows themselves well as a community. So sometimes we don't need to know them in such perfect words.
Okay,
Um,
but for the
but
record,
but for the record, you just
they
checked a
are
list.
they are respect, participation, weirdness, consent, humor, privacy, and community.
Wow, you probably got like 6 of those, I reckon. I reckon the
I got
consent and the
solid C.
privacy.
Yeah.
Consent and privacy.
To be fair, those weren't really my focus in the organization.
Yeah, you're not on safety team. That's also another question I would love to talk to you about is like safety, consent, and the ways that you'll, as part of community, have created a social fabric based on trust and safety and consent. So let's come back to that one. Okay, next quick question is what is the structure of your events?
When you say structure, do you mean like what's the organizational structure and how we put them on?
Event structure. So when you gather people in real life, what does that look like?
Got it. So our events are all multi-day interactive narrative parties, art exhibits, installations, and what that looks like is um, typically occurs over the course of a weekend, whether that be in an outdoor location or an indoor location. It's usually somewhere in the round of a couple thousand people. And we will start the narrative or the storyline beforehand through um, email, newsletters, and our digital platforms, Slack and Discord. And then once people arrive, they sort of like enter Act One of our event. They come in, they set up their home base, whether that be a campsite or a hotel room, whatever that is. And then we have, over the course of the 3 or 4 days, a narrative that unfolds, and it unfolds across all of the touch points, whether that be the signage, the original art that our art program helps produce over the entire landscape of the event, the large scale stage activations that we create, or the decentralized alternate reality game scavenger hunts that we create. All of that sort of like ties back to a central theme and story. And the participants also bring a lot of content and experiences to the events as well. And everybody takes the journey together through what is essentially almost like a participatory 3 act play. There's also a lot of different like mute live and DJ music, so celebratory elements like that. And that happens for about 3 or 4 days until the event wraps, and then we start planning the next one.
Hmm.
Outside of the events, though, we host a lot of different gatherings as well that help sort of like stand up the scaffolding that is the community.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, you'll go really above and beyond. No doubt. You spoke a little bit in that answer about how you communicate with your community, but may I hear more details of how do you communicate with them between events or during events, pre, post events, however you want to answer that.
Sure. So I'd say our biggest like call to actions and um, most priority messaging goes out via newsletters. And we also try to sort of blend the messaging in the newsletter in the voice of either Take Three, which has its own sort of like guidelines, or within the voice of the fictional narrative that we're pursuing for that upcoming event. But oftentimes trying to couch uh, logistics and pragmatic info inside of something that's a little bit more fun and accessible so that it's not so dry and boring. So yeah, email, messaging, newsletters, and then I'd say the second tier is through our Discord, which has over 5,000 members of our community. I'd say most people who come to our events are also active members on our Discord. And on our Discord, we have everything ranging from like core event info to our request for proposals for our art grant program, all the way to like people posting pictures of their furry pets, job opportunities, housing opportunities, activism opportunities. Really, you name it, free stuff exists on this Discord. Anyone can contribute, and I think our admins make channels readily for trending topics as well. Um, a sort of like next level of engagement we have is our Slack that has about 2,000 people on it, and that fluctuates based on upcoming events. We have our core staff that navigates all of our operations on Slack, and then we temporarily or seasonally onboard all of our grantees, our art grantees, onto our Slack as well for them to be more closely linked to our staff for coordinating logistics or narrative support, artistic art support, and that sort of thing. In addition, we have some in-person communication channels as well. We host the occasional town hall, and town halls are often in-person moments for our community to show up and be in-person dialogue around how to better improve our systems and our approach to hosting community events. And then we also will occasionally have things like a narrative feedback forum or town hall, something like that, where people where our community members are able to provide feedback on uh, different creative directions that the organization is exploring. And then we also have socials and workshops and stuff. I'd say it's less of a like communication tool than it is a sort of like part of our fabric, but it, in its programming is a form of communication. But I think that, oh, and also feedback forms are kind of a form of communication, albeit more of a ask from our community, but it's a point of contact for sure. And I think that I'm sure there's other parts, but that's those are the key elements of how we are in dialogue with our community.
Mm-hmm. You're always so thorough, and that's something that I really admire about Take Three. And you mentioned feedback like the town halls, and you also mentioned feedback with the feedback forms. I want to slip a question in here about like when did you get to the point of realizing that you needed to formalize feedback? And then did you iterate on how to receive that feedback and then how you integrate that feedback?
I think we are at the core experience design nerds. So I think having feedback built in from day one was a must. I think we've always collected feedback. Whether or not we've integrated it or collected it well is up for discussion. I think we've really improved those systems over the years, but I think we've always wanted to know, like, hey, did you like our art? Like that's always been like something we're
Yes?
deeply, yeah, yeah,
No.
did it work? Like that's always been like such a deep curiosity of ours. Like it's we're not the type of event that puts on a big show that everyone sits and watches and goes home, and we feel just good that we got to get on stage. We are in dialogue in everything that we do, and feedback is just such a crucial element so we understand what our opportunities for improvement are, what's working, what should we double down on, what needs to get scrapped because it's, not serving anyone. Um, and so I think a second part of your question is how do you integrate the feedback? Was that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think something that we learned early on with feedback is like don't ask questions that you can't action on. Um,
Oh, that's a good one.
because people don't want to be able to like you shouldn't be asking for feedback for things you can't change or have the capacity to change. Um, and also you're creating more friction from your community. Like asking for feedback from your community is asking for labor, right? There's like a inherent invisible cost for every question you ask them. And it's an additional friction point that could reduce the amount of feedback you get. So we need to ensure that in our feedback strategy, every question we're asking is tied to something that's actionable. And in theory, inside of a roadmap that is something that we can move the needle on by the next event.
Mm. So you've got a
And
measurable timeline of how and when in your capacity to integrate feedback by the next event, which is about a 6 month cycle.
that's right, optimally, right? And so that's sort of like how we vet gathering feedback. And then I think there's checkpoints through the year where we distill the feedback and we create actionable roadmaps based on the feedback, and then we have checkpoints throughout the year where we look and do and we sort of reconcile how are we tracking towards that roadmap. And then in our town halls we respond to how we've actioned against that feedback. So for instance we'll get feedback like a really basic thing. Let's just say, oh, parking was took way longer than it should have last year. Is like, let's just say that's an overwhelming piece of feedback we've gotten. Then hopefully in the town hall that happens 1 or 2 months before the event, we'll be able to say, hey, we've implemented a new parking strategy that should decrease that friction point by 50%. And then hopefully by the next town hall after the event, we're able to say, hey, we successfully were able to track against that goal.
Mm-hmm. And just to get to the root of that, like you said, don't ask questions or don't ask for feedback to things that you can't change. Like, why?
I think it's because it's a level of expectation setting. Like, hey, we're not magicians. We have limited resources and ability. We can't change the weather. Like, so we're not going to ask a question about would the event have been better if the weather was better. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain things that we don't want to introduce as a possibility for improvement, and so we don't ask about it. I think we want to ask questions that we can action on, and so just being realistic with our community about our capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious about the trust building and the safety building of um actioning things, the feedback. So I want to bring that back into the conversation about like trust and safety that we talk about in a little bit. But going to another more practical, like logistical question around the structure of Take Three, how do you market your events?
Our events are solely marketed through word of mouth. We've never spent any money on advertising or marketing. Um, and so our events are private, invite only through a sponsorship program. And we've designed with our partners a ticketing platform called Secret Party that provides a sponsorship tracking program. For every person who has been to our event, they get 2 invites. And when they invite someone to the next event, they're attached as their sponsor and they're assigned responsibility for that person's actions. And so there's built-in accountability and trust building within our organization and our community that don't just invite someone because you think they'll like the event. It's like you're introducing that person, but you're also introducing everyone they know and everyone that they know and everyone that they know. So it's a huge responsibility to be a sponsor. And so we really ask our community to be really have a lot of discretion around who they choose to invite to our events. And that's why we limit it to two people. Like, I'm sorry, if your polycule is bigger than two, you're going to have to pick two, right? So once someone's been to our events, they gain sponsorship privileges as well. But if someone that you've invited to our events causes an issue, breaks the rules, so on and so forth, you will also be held responsible, and that could range from being asked to help repair whatever issue is being caused, or having your sponsorship privileges revoked, or worse. So there's really a range of there's stakes for our community members to maintain a certain level of decorum and responsibility for the people who they're bringing into our community, which has really reduced the level of conflict and uh, enriched the like built-in trust that are at our events. Because when you come to one of our events, you know everyone there has someone else's name on the line. Like everyone's been vetted, right? And I think the level of sort of like exploration and like the level of your freak flag you can let fly and like let your guard down and feel more safe to explore and play and express yourself increases tremendously when you feel like your container is safer.
I feel like the through line of this conversation so far has been like trust and safety. So let's go there. And then we
Okay.
can come back to some other things because I think perhaps people listening to this conversation are like, okay, cool. So it's like a art party theater thing. I think I get it. It's like people come together and a lot of the what we've been speaking about so far is more like practical and more structural. Um, and that I want to preface the conversation about like trust and safety is that one of in my experience, one of the beautiful things about Take Three is that they're incredibly good at creating a container. It's nearly like good parenting, where they create a really clear container and you do that really well so that then there can be absolute chaos inside and in like an open way. And that I think the question I want to ask you first is before we talk about trust and safety, just so that people can understand the connection between that like structure and chaos or like the safety and the trust for the sake of what? Like, why do people want to come to Take Three events? What does
Mm.
it give them?
I think it Take Three presents a level of intimacy and freedom of exploration that mainstream events have failed to provide most people in today's day and age. Because I think so often now when you go to any major events, whether that be a concert or a festival, most people are living through their phones. And I think that's really limited the level of self-expression that you see in public. I think privacy, there's like a direct through line between privacy and the the agency someone has in feeling the ability to fully express themselves in public. And so I think Take Three provides this container that promises a certain level of privacy. We have a media policy that I'm trying to follow strictly right now. Um, and we
You're doing
have,
great.
thank you. And we have, on top of that, I think a brand that we've built where we hero boundary pushing, edge pushing art. We say, okay, now that we've created the safe container for exploration, let's um let's see like where that edge is between the comfort zone and the growth zone is by exploring art and themes that wouldn't be appropriate or people wouldn't participate with in more public environments. And so I think that's like one of the more unique value propositions that we as a community have. And then from like a more artistic standpoint, what we do, we when we use like the word immersive or participatory, like we really mean that every individual who comes to our events, we purposefully call them a participant and not an audience member. It's everyone who comes to our events responsibility to be a part of the show. Everyone's on stage at all times. And we have created pathways for the public to bring art that is at the same scale of the art that we feature. And so we've blurred the line between what is the experiences that we as an organization have funded and chose to hero and what our community has brought to the table. And we blur that line so that because it doesn't matter, there's no hierarchy in expression. It's just about creating a platform and doing as much as we can to fund that platform and support it. And then we give the participants agencies. So we have a narrative that unfolds over multiple days, and we say, hey, here's the role that you're going to play in it, and here's your objective. So please, like, be a part of the show. Like, help us understand how what the outcome is, how you're going to play a part in the climax, so that we aren't just asking people to come and watch something we're putting on, because our ability to create impact from that perspective is much smaller than if we're all doing it collectively, if we're all pitching in and just adding a little bit of our own superpower to the mix. It's that much yummier.
Yummier. Beautiful, beautiful answer. Yeah, I feel like I put you on the spot then of just being like, why do people come? Like, sure, people come, sure, people love to go to Take Three events, but like, why? So,
I think people keep coming because their friends are there.
yeah, because community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, we talk about what our differentiator is a lot. And like I go to a lot of events, I go to a lot of festivals, and I often miss a feeling that like I matter at the event. I think
Mm.
most events just have
Oof.
like a triangle that say bathroom, bar, stage, and you just live in that triangle.
Mm.
And I think the human experience, as it connects to the idea of festivals and like ritualistically and traditionally where we come from in terms of a festival, we exist far beyond the threshold of that triangle. And so I think we're
Mm.
trying to just like widen that space a little bit more.
Mm. That's beautiful. That makes me teary thinking about like you saying, oh, I matter in this space. And as you're saying, like agency before and how maybe a like more one way or relationship where it's like you someone's on stage and someone's in the audience. It's like a one direction engagement. Whereas like as you're saying, like immersive, interactive, experiential art is so much about like decentralizing. And that actually as a participant, you have agency, but you also have value. And yeah, thinking about that in that context, in a world where we're so focused on consuming and extracting and taking from experiences, it's okay, but what are we willing to give back to them for them to keep thriving? And I think I'll speak personally is that my relationship with Take Three and like, how do I want to contribute to this community if I don't necessarily see myself as like the specific kind of artist is a really beautiful question of like, okay, but still, how do I show up and contribute in other ways? And so thanks. Thanks for that of like an impersonal nugget. Okay, so going into the trust and safety, the I matter and like that you and Take Three create such a clear container of safety and trust so that people can feel like they're valued and people feel like they matter and people feel like they have agency and feel like they can be boundary pushing and edge pushing and experimental in the ways they are in art and creativity and relationship. How do you and have you built that scaffolding of trust and safety over the years? Like, what are the different elements or actions? And I know that there's so many over a decade of doing this, but like perhaps some key pillars of how you'll hold that trust and safety for the community.
Sure. So I think, unlike a lot of events and even communities, one of the four four pillars of our org structure is safety. So our org structure and four pillars essentially is like production, interface, which is like all the non-stage stuff, the art team, and safety. And within safety lives a web of different sub-orgs that support that container that you're speaking to. Some of those include things that might you might not initially think as a safety element, like our tea house. And so at every event we have a gung fu style tea house with free tea, and what that provides is a space of grounded connection for people's nervous systems to come back to center. Because what we're doing is we're creating really highly stimulating, participatory, mind bending art,
Chaotic.
chaotic. And like I said, we're edging past that comfort zone, but we don't want to go into a place of trauma or danger. And so we have like this really fun, beautifully designed, very casual tea house that we purposely do not activate with interactive art. You can always count on coming there and sitting down in a peaceful environment, connecting with strangers over a cup of tea. And that for us is sort of like the safety spine of our event in a big way. If you need like a deeper level of sanctuary, we also have our uh oh my goodness, it's it's escaping me right now.
Cozy.
Cozy, thank you. So glad you've been to our events. Co Cozy, which is a fairly silent room with soft squish for you to sort of like nap, lay down, and we usually have like an elder in like a rocking chair just holding space. And that's just
So
like
beautiful.
zero stimulation room, if like a tea house also sounds like too much. And so those are like experiential ways that we create safety at our organization. From like a staffing perspective, we don't have traditional security teams. So the way most events are structured is they bring in a third party security vendor, which at some point as we scale, we may need to introduce some element of that. But at our baseline, we will always run our own team. We call them the Stranger Team, which is based off the Burning Man Ranger model. And they're really a team that is there to support harm reduction and the safety and psychological and physical well-being of all of our attendees. As friendly faces, they do stuff like carrying gum and earplugs and um, things that will just like help you get over little humps, but they're also there making sure that anyone who is physically or psychologically pushed beyond their limits is getting the help that they need, as well as any art, whether it be stuff that we fund or our participants bring, aren't causing any harm, and everything is just moving in flow. They're like our vibe police, but I hate the word police. And they wear orange vests and they roam
Vibe
around our
guys.
events. They're vibe guys, exactly. And they have radios on and they're friendly face. And it's not like, oh, don't let the security team see you having too good of a time or whatever. They're oftentimes, all times actually, also community members. So we create a team. We've created a team that is us to support us. Um, and then on top of that, and forgive me for anyone in our org who might end up watching this, but we also have a couple organizations that work inside and outside of our org. The names have changed over the years, so I might butcher that a little bit. But we have like a crisis intervention team on site, um, and they're there to uh, work with any sort of conflicts or issues that might occur on site, whether that be like a physical or sexual altercation or something of that nature, which happen rarely, but when you get a couple thousand people together to push boundaries and party, like things inevitably happen. So we've set up support services with people from like therapists and conflict resolution backgrounds to support with that sort of thing at our events. And whenever something like that does happen, we also open up cases and we work with the people involved in those cases outside of the walls of our event too. So post event, we work with them to find resolution to any conflicts that do arise. We also have a safety team that works year round for any complaints that come to our team post event. So sometimes intense or traumatic things can happen at the event, but we don't hear about it till after. And we do a similar thing where we open up a case and we have a team that works with any sort of members who are part of that case to find a resolution, including creating restorative justice plans, working with local therapists and local programs to ensure that anyone who has uh, perpetuated any sort of like abuse or any sort of issue in our community is being addressed and given an opportunity to repair any of the damage that they've done. So yeah, there's our year-round team, there's our on-site team, there's our strangers, our tea house, our cozy team. Um, I think are yeah the main spokes of that safety team.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like the way that you'll bake safety into the process, like even you were saying with the sponsorship structure of like you're accountable for the people that you invite, and it's you have to endorse them. Like that's so much about safety and vetting and making sure that people understand the like fabric between them, where you're like you're not just individuals, but you need to be looking out for each other's safety and extending trust to each other too. So I feel like
That's
we could have a very long conversation about this, but there, as I said, the key pillars, and you'll do that so well.
thanks. Yeah, I didn't even mention we also have a great medical team on site too.
Yeah, true,
Crucial.
true, 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 crucial. Mm. I want to come back to a practical question around like financial model because I think that it's really interesting the way that y'all have navigated finances over the years and financial structures. And I think that like community builders who are listening to this would find it so interesting to know like what have you experimented with, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what has made you realize, oh, we need to shift, like now you're in a non-profit structure, but blending, like as we spoke about at the very start, that y'all are an artist collective in one capacity, you're a nonprofit in another capacity now. You make money, but you're also doing it based in deep relationships of people who have known each other for a long time. Like, how do you navigate all of that in a financial model?
Lots of iteration, that's for sure. It's tough. We don't have a financial model that is built perfectly. Like it's got some issues because what we haven't done is we haven't built an organization from the ground up as a financial first organization. It's a community first organization. So we don't do things like we don't sell alcohol. We don't have sponsorships. We don't do a lot of things that drive revenue that other events and organizations do. Um, that would provide more financial support for those who contribute. So we've really worked over the years to refine what that model looks like. And where we've landed is our events are really largely volunteer run. Um, and that, especially from the artist perspective, acts as an incubator for emerging artists. We're not able to like support established artists or anyone who's trying to make a living making art, we provide them an opportunity to build a portfolio or build their skills and hopefully bring that learning and bring it to the next level and search for advancing their career through other avenues as well. And then internally, we pay most people who work year round on our events, but there's a lot of people who come from privilege, from tech work and that sort of thing in the Bay Area that choose to contribute and volunteer a lot of their time for the organization. So I think it also acts as a sort of like equalizer for people who do have excess skill and time to be able to contribute to community in a meaningful way. Um, Over the years, we've transitioned to a nonprofit model, which allows us more financial transparency in terms of getting to communicate where our finances sit across the community. And we open that up for feedback. We show where all of our finances go every year in our town hall, and we take feedback and try to adjust based on that.
Hmm. I think it's also worth mentioning your ticket structure,
Mm.
because
Right.
I think that's something you'll have experimented with.
We have a sliding scale ticket structure. We have a low income ticket system. We have a BIPOC ticket system. We also have just a general sliding scale ticket structure that allows people that have more access to finances to support the organization, support the artists who are creating work for us. And then we have the people who come from less privilege or have less access to finances to be able to pay what they can up to a certain limit, or apply for lower income ticket opportunities. There's also lots of ways to volunteer. So if you want to come for free and you're down to do anything from serving tea to making art, there's lots of different ways to plug in as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I know that that has been, as perhaps this is a whole nother conversation, but like experimenting with like what does equity look like in action when it comes to like financial equity of where Take Three does have a huge range of class and access to wealth, and like finding the sort of the praxis of like what does that look like to create accessibility and balance and equity between all of that. So I think you'll have done a really amazing job of experimenting with that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of income disparity in our community. Um, and I think something we want to avoid is like, let's not make all the brokies make art for all the richies. You know what I mean? Let's not create a system that is that. Um, and like, what can we do to sort of like subvert those systemic tendencies?
Hmm. How would you how would you answer that in a sentence or two?
Well, I'd say there's part of it built into our RFP process. So when we have like a request for proposal and we're providing funding for art, there is space in there for people to reflect on how much funding they actually need. Like, is this something that they actually have like the financial ability to fund themselves if they come uh from wealth? And then on the flip side, when the people who come from wealth are buying a ticket, can they actually pay more? So we're trying to, I think, disrupt the sort of like pay to play tendency of entertainment and events.
Hmm.
Like we certainly don't have any VIP tickets. You don't get any perks for paying more, but we do create transparency around where your money goes, and we create clear language and some basic like metrics you can track your income level against to understand where you should actually be landing in terms of ticket price to create a more equitable experience for everybody at our events.
This conversation really makes me think that Take Three is kind of far beyond a community. Like maybe our sense of community and the way that we use that word, like we often throw that around and like what does that actually mean and look like structurally and in action? But I just feel like Take Three is so beyond our current, what's the word, like standards of what community looks like that it nearly feels like Take Three has created a municipality or like a civilization compared to so many community builders in like how thorough and detailed and thoughtful and above and beyond Take Three is. It's just helping me have a new, deeper appreciation of how impressive it is and that
So
y'all are
sweet.
doing a thing.
I mean, the community is kind of the art project too, right? It's a bunch of like
Totally.
community nerds trying to figure out how to community better. It's not just people who want to belong, but it's people who are like, what's the best way of belonging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the kind of taglines of Take Three is like make fun more work. And I think that there's like another tagline there and it's like make community more work, like in a beautiful way. But it's like, oh, how do we go so hard on our art and how do we go so hard on like what it means to gather that we like create new ways of existing?
Well said.
It's pretty cool. Pretty
It's,
cool.
it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Um, I have so many more questions for you, and aware that we have like a smaller amount of time, like 5, 10 minutes max. And I feel as though we could make Take Three its own series, honestly, because y'all have been doing it for so long and in such detailed ways. Um, but I want to allow some opportunities. Like we've spoken very much about the kind of practical details, but I want to allow some opportunities for people who are listening to receive some very like specific feedback. Like, say in the first year or two that Take Three was running events, what are 3 things that you wish that you had known or learned earlier that other community builders may hear and be like, oh, damn, that.
I'd say the top lesson that comes to mind is acknowledgement is free. Acknowledging people's contribution, their hard work, their presence in community is hugely validating and doesn't cost you anything.
Hmm.
And oftentimes, community is invisible labor, um, and the compensation for that is acknowledgement.
Was that a hard lesson to learn
Yeah, I
or to
think it
realize?
was. I think when we started, we all thought we were doing it just like for the sake of art and that like we were all art martyrs or something like that. But that's
Art martyrs, damn.
but like that's not sustainable. Like what we were really doing was like creating excuses for us to be expressive together. And if that didn't feel good, there was no point in continuing to doing it. And so, yeah, I think we saw burnout or resentment or yeah, just like a lack of feeling like a contribution was valued. And I think that that was a tough lesson to learn and something that I think we've gotten a lot better at. I just got uh, a gold certificate, a gold fucking star certificate for for helping mentor the person I brought in to do my role, and so that feels really good, and that's a complete 180 from how we sort of like started in acknowledging people in our organization.
Mm. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So acknowledgement is free. What else were you like, oh, this?
I think having providing your community with access uh, to being in dialogue and helping shape it is really critical, and ensuring that there is like a true sense of dialogue. That I think a lot of community burnout comes from people feeling like their voice isn't heard, and so creating opportunities for dialogue to be acted on and people having avenues for contributing feedback is really key to a community flourishing and thriving.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying earlier about the feedback of like asking the questions that you can actually act on and integrate.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, like to your point, like it builds a sense of trust, and it builds an incentive for um, continued investment. And that's like what community members are doing. They're investing in something that like they don't own stake or shares of. They just own a sense of connection. And if like the ROI isn't mathing, then people dip out of community, right? So it's like, how does a community return that investment to their members? Wow, I went full biz on you.
That was an interesting analogy, but okay. Topo Chico.
Effervesce with me with my Topo Chico.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Of feeling like you receive more than you give in the bigger picture of it, that it's not like a tit for tat, but it's like, is this, am I receiving what I want and need as well? Mm-hmm. Okay. I appreciate how these things that you wish that you'd understood earlier are very much like relationship focused. Is there anything else that you want to say on like relationships as part of community?
Let's do that again in a different way.
So you were saying acknowledgement is free and then like giving people a chance to feel like they're really like have agency and investment and like connection to the community. And my sense of like the theme of those things are both like very focused on relationships and quality of relationships and like relationship building as part of community. And I wonder if there's like anything else that you want to speak to about relationships and the importance of relationships within community generally, if there's anything that comes to mind.
Something that just came to mind is like responsibility. I think as communities grow, they require more people to shepherd it. And I think seeing uh, the direction or different directions people are excited to community grow with and giving them the agency to shepherd the community in that direction is was like a lesson that took a minute to learn, but was really what superpowered Take Three. I think it's really hard for us to be like, hey, we need this role and try to find someone to like back into that role rather than like build the community around the superpowers that exist within it. Like, hey, you're
Mm-hmm.
really great at this thing and you're really excited to bring that to the community. Maybe that's a direction the community can grow. And I think with that, you grow with the momentum rather than with friction.
Beautiful. In this series of speaking to community builders, I hear that same thing again and again in slightly different words of like delegate earlier, find the people who are invested, who are excited and align them and give them opportunities to feel more responsibility and investment and agency. And it's beautiful to hear you say that even like 10 years on. I have two more questions for you. The second last question is, what has Take Three given you over the years?
Mm. I think it's given me a sense of identity and confidence in my ability. It's sort of acted as a boot camp or training ground for my passion to become my work. Um, it's provided me with like such an immense exposure to designing, building communities and experiences that um, I don't think any sort of traditional learning environment or even like corporate environment could have ever prepared me for. And I think it's just like it has been an invaluable container for me to grow as an individual, as a leader, and as an artist. And so I think that that for sure is a key factor.
And my last question is, when shit is hard, because inevitably shit is hard with community, what keeps you going?
I keep a notepad of all the times participants and members of our community have told me about how it's changed their life. So we've had incredible things come from our community, whether that be people meeting their spouse or um, choosing to change careers or move across the country or get out of an abusive relationship or conceive a child. We've had weddings at our events. And I've just kept a sort of like list of things that have happened and have people have told me about how this community has impacted their life in such like deep foundational ways. And that's sort of like something I always come back to when I get lost in the sauce and I have to take a step back and be like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we going through all this extra labor and all this extra work and like busting our ass for what? And I just have a list of like a laundry list of how many lives we've like actually transformed, and have to remember how special and unique that truly is.
Is there a particular thing on that list that like often comes to mind first?
I think it's just the general theme that oftentimes we are a product of our childhood and our setting and our surroundings, and rarely are we given spaces to experiment with a different way of being through play and through experimentation and trying different patterns of being in this world. And the fact that we like create a judgment free, like low stakes, high reward container that truly acts as a space for transformative experiences, I think is at the root of what fuels that work.
Y'all have created a truly special place,
It is.
and this conversation with you has deepened my love of you and my admiration of you. And it's deepened my love and admiration of Take Three. So thank you for so generously sharing. I know that it's always a balance in terms of media policies to talk about Take Three, and I really appreciate you and the privacy element of that, of talking about it freely for the sake of others to learn while also trying to be private. So thank you for sharing so openly and generously while balancing that. A pleasure, a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for your curiosity and for being a member of that community. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's always refreshing to reflect on the community. It's always changing uh, in terms of how it's impacted me. So I appreciate the moment to reflect on it.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there anything that you feel like hasn't been said that would help you feel complete in this conversation?
I think it's really hard for anyone to ever like quantify the power of community and can often be confusing why we do the work that we do. But I think the like never underestimate the power of community, especially in moments of need and mutuality, and that there is such deep value in it. Um, Even if you can't always touch it all the time, the moments it does show up will feel like a miracle.
Oof. Perfect moment to finish on. Thank you. Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having me.